Thank you so much. We are going to welcome for this panel Mr. Konrad from the House of Commons in Canada, Mr. Jonathan Ruckert from NovaWorks in Australia, Mr. Michael Harty from the Organization of American States, the OAS, and Mr. Clive Mutentwa from the National Assembly of Zambia. For this particular panel, I'd like to first yield the floor very briefly to each one of you just to introduce yourselves, and then I will yield the floor for your presentations about this topic. Konrad, would you like to start introducing yourself in 1 minute to the colleagues?
Thank you, Luís, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I'm Konrad from the House of Commons of Canada. My background is mostly technical. As a software engineer, I spent most of my career building distributed information systems and digital business platforms. I've been with the House of Commons for over 20 years now. And in the recent years, I've spent focusing more on the strategic role as a senior technology strategist, focusing around the digital business platforms to enable the digital business transformation within our organization, which cybersecurity is a big part of this. So I'm happy to be here as part of this panel and this discussion. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Konrad. Jonathan, I know you just made a presentation, but if you can introduce yourself again very briefly to the colleagues that are just joining, please feel free to use the...
Yeah, thanks, Luís, and yeah, welcome everyone. And I'm very excited to be part of this panel today. My name is Jonathan. I'm the founder and CEO of NovaWorks. We work with different parliaments from advice and consultancy through to implementation around cloud, native on-premise, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, a whole range of interesting things when it comes to parliamentary process. And we've been working with parliaments for nearly 20 plus years.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Allow me now to invite now Michael. Michael, would like to introduce yourself to us?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Michael Harty. I'm working with the OAS Secretariat of Strengthening Democracy, which focuses a lot on legislatures in the Americas and technical capacity building with them. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael, for introducing yourself. Clive, would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Thank you, Luís. My name is Clive Mutentwa. I've been in ICT for the past 18 years, spanning from industries in mining. I've been in telecoms. I did that with IBM, and I'm now with the Parliament of Zambia, which is the National Assembly of Zambia. Predominantly, I've been in an ICT infrastructure person, looking at network systems, and in the last 8 years in telecoms, I've been in charge of network security, looking at cybersecurity incidences and managing the outcome of it in telecom. Here at National Assembly of Zambia, I'm in charge of network systems and cybersecurity, and overseeing the ICT governance of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive, for introducing yourself as well. Well, now, as I mentioned to you, I'd like to yield the floor to each one of you to, in 10 minutes, make your presentation on your considerations about cybersecurity in Parliament. I'll start with you, Konrad. Would you like to use the floor to make your presentation?
Thank you, Luís. I'll just start with sharing the screen. Just confirming that everybody can see my screen on the slides.
Yes, perfect. Can you just make a test on changing the slides? Because sometimes it doesn't change.
Okay. So to level set, just for the benefit of everybody.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you just make a test on changing the slides to see if it's moving or not?
Okay, of course.
Sometimes. Okay, perfect. Thank you so
good?
much.
All right, no problem. Okay, so thank you again, Luís. And for the benefit of everybody, just to level set, when we're considering cybersecurity in the context of Parliament, or in any other organization for that matter, it's about protecting three main things: which is people, information, and business critical processes. So if I dive a little bit deeper to just give you a little bit of a context about each one, because that's going to set the stage a little bit for our discussion. When we talk about people, protecting people in the context of Parliament, we're referring to protecting people like members of Parliament or employees like myself from harm caused as a result of a cyber event. And this harm can either be in physical or psychological in nature. So as a basic example, imagine the privacy of the member of parliament gets compromised and their private information such as personal residency address gets published on the internet for malicious intent, which is often referred to as doxing. So you can imagine that, especially in the political context, this can potentially bring either psychological or physical harm to the MP. Which brings me to the next point, protecting the information. And in this case, we're protecting the privacy of the MP by protecting their information or their identities. So when we talk about protecting information itself, there's three key elements that we always refer to, and that's protecting confidentiality, integrity, and also availability. So I already gave you an example about protecting confidentiality and why it's important, because confidential information in the hands of the wrong people can often lead to injury, whether it's the physical or psychological in nature. But when it comes to protecting integrity and availability, this is about ensuring that the data is trustworthy and also available that in order to support your business processes, especially the business processes that are crucial to operate the organization. Which then brings me to the third point that we're protecting, or the third element that we're protecting, is the business critical processes. And just to put things into perspective a little bit, in modern organizations, IT can be considered like a central nervous system. So IT systems are generally an integral part of every single business process. So you can imagine, without IT, the organization will be often paralyzed. So it is important then to make sure that we protect the systems that are here to support the business processes that are crucial in order to organization to function. So in the context of Parliament, this directly can affect the democratic participation. So based on these three key elements, as you can see, cybersecurity has a very significant responsibility within the organization. But when we talk about cybersecurity, we often think of it as a technical problem, when in reality, it's actually a business problem. Cyber events are not about disrupting technology. They're more about disrupting the business. So this requires a paradigm shift from cybersecurity being technology focused and to be a little bit more business focused. So in terms of the business perspective, when it comes to this, to cybersecurity, there are three main important business scenarios to consider. So the first one is we want people to do their job securely from anywhere. So in the context of a hybrid parliament like our own, we allow members to participate in a democratic process, either in person or virtually anywhere from Canada. And we have a job, and we must ensure that they participate in this process securely. The second element is we also want to minimize the business damage from security incidents. So when an incident happens, you need to evaluate how does that affect your business and what kind of critical process it can hamper that may not allow basically for the business to continue, or in the context of Parliament, allow, let's say, the democratic participation. So in this case, we also want to identify and protect critical business assets. So those business assets could be the data itself, or also the systems themselves that are all critical to your business's processes. So another element of the paradigm shift is the sophistication of cyber threats is evolving every day. So it's not enough just to think that that we will always be protected by the network perimeter or any other cybersecurity-centric solutions. So we have to assume a risk of compromise and also understand these risks, how they will affect your business. So let that sink in a little bit. What we're saying here is that you have to assume that at one point we may be compromised, and it's really how you prepare and respond to that compromise is going to basically see the success, how you are able to continue your business. So for example, if you're not ready, ransomware attacks can be really paralyzing to the organization. And in the parliamentary context, it could directly impact the democratic participation, which is rather serious. So with this paradigm shift, we shouldn't only be talking about cybersecurity, but rather we should be talking holistically about cyber resiliency. So cyber resiliency by definition is about organizations' capability to continuously deliver intended outcomes despite adverse cyber events. So this encompasses business continuity, information security, and organizational resilience, enabling the different entities to adapt to both known and unknown crises, threats, adversities, and also challenges. So as you can see, this is not framed from a technical perspective, but rather from a business perspective. So what are the different elements of cyber resilience? If you consider in the context of an actual cyber event, there are three main elements. So there's the cyber event itself, which is the bang. Then you have the left of the bang and also the right of the bang. So the left of the bang is about preventing or lessening the impact of the attacks. During the bang, it's all about detecting the cyber event. And right of the bang is about how you rapidly and effectively manage these attacks. So basically, how to respond or recover to those incidents. So ultimately, there are three main elements to cyber resilience. You've got the prevention, you've got the detection, and also response and recovery. So I would argue that the left of the bank is maybe a little bit more technology focused, because when you're talking about prevention, you got to put in all the different security controls that are necessary to prevent an intrusion, prevent a cyber attack. And that requires maybe a system architecture changes or implementation of different cybersecurity solutions. You're basically doing everything to either prevent or at least lessen the impact of the attack. But then you also need to be able to detect an event if an event happens. So that also is a little bit more technically centric. You have to have the technology that enables you to detect those sort of events. Now, when it comes to the right of the bang, which is the response and recovery, it's how you manage the attacks. Yes, there's some technical elements to it to recover a system. So making sure that the architecture supports recoverability through backups and maybe, let's say, rebuilding the system from source control or all these different technical elements. But a big portion of it is actually business centric. You have to involve the business in the different scenarios. How are you actually going to respond if an event will happen? So in the context of, let's say, a ransomware attack, you need to be ready to, first of all, recognize what are the different signals of a ransom attack and be ready to shut certain elements of the systems. They need to understand what the impact is of the shutting down those systems or isolating those systems, and what is the impact on the business itself. And the business also needs to understand that there's risks associated with this, and they need to be able to have some kind of a plan to continue the business processes, whether it's resorting to manual processes or have playbooks in place that allow you to effectively manage this attack and also recover as quickly as possible. So my time is almost up. I'll leave you with a very final thought. Basically, you have to do this process and continuously adapt. But as a final thought, in the modern world, technology demand is exponential. And we as a digital service provider, we often work with business to create value for the organization to continue to meet those evolving demands. And for example, we have now the consideration of AI and how that it basically helps the business. So as we bring in and trying to meet those those demands, as we create this value, in the process of creating this value, we have to also think how we protect it at the same time. And it's really working with the business to help us do this. So thank you very much. Over to you, Luís.
Thank you so much, Konrad, for the very interesting presentation. I took a few notes here to ask questions later, and I see colleagues are already raising their hands to ask some questions, which we will do after all the presentations have been done. Jonathan, would you like to use the floor for 10 minutes as well and make your presentation about this topic?
Yeah, fantastic. I absolutely will. So I'll share my screen as well. I might have to turn off my video because of my little quirk, but yeah, we'll get there as well. So cool. All right. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different sort of way of looking at things, and I want to sort of focus around cybersecurity, and the landscape is really about focus on artificial intelligence today as well. So as we all sort of know, with the sort of current use or the growing sort of buzz around artificial intelligence, you know, we look at it and go, AI systems are really among the fastest growing applications globally. And the interest in these systems is really immense. And, you know, when we actually look at it, you know, what is AI actually being used for? And I really sort of like what Konrad was saying is that, you know, what IT is all around is to actually enable the business. So, you know, the business wants to, you know, look at handling activities traditionally done by staff, you know, to increase efficiency, potentially lower costs, but also really, you know, coming back down to providing staff to focus on high value tasks instead of really having to focus on those sort of low level tasks repeatedly. So when we look at the cybersecurity side of things, you know, we need to make sure that when we're looking at artificial intelligence, we want to, say, manage our risk. And risk management is where I sort of see cybersecurity being at its sort of forefront. You know, cybersecurity is a business risk at the end of the day. Yes, you use technology to help with it, but at the end of the day, you know, as sort of Konrad was saying, you know, it's that sort of paradigm shift to make it is a business problem, not a technical problem, if that makes sense. You know, looking at sort of managing your risk profile appropriately. You know, again, cybersecurity should not be a blocker. It should be viewed as an enabler against what the business needs, you know, but it's understanding what level of risk, you know, your cybersecurity profile actually then looks like as well. In the middle, I've put international collaboration, you know, what we're actually doing here, which is really, really important. You know, there are a lot of different parliaments out there or legislative bodies or agencies out there across the world who actively publish content. You know, we're writing an article at the moment, you know, between myself and Luís around this, and it will be published in an online format as well. You know, understanding that there's a lot of learnings out there. Collaborative efforts really do help to manage your cybersecurity risk in some respects, because you know you'll have other parliaments have been or legislative bodies which have been attacked. They've got learnings, you know, and you know you can learn from a lot of different people around what we can actually then do to make your risk profile actually even better as well. Obviously, with the introduction of AI, it does introduce new security challenges, and really it's about how do you actually address those proactively as well. So I want to go through 3 different types of what I call the common threats around artificial intelligence from a cybersecurity point of view. So these are some of the sort of high-level things which we usually go through around when we're actually dealing with artificial intelligence. So my sort of original comment from the last previous sessions was all around trust and transparency. And these particular threats is all about removing, or these threats are all about making sure that they can destroy that trust or destroy that transparency as well. So some of the common sort of threats that we actually are dealing with are sort of data poisoning of an AI model. And why is that sort of interest? So it's the ability to actually manipulate an AI model training data so that the model learns incorrect patterns. And where it becomes really interesting around that, and why that sort of is really important, is that, you know, it may misclassify data, produce inaccurate, biased, or malicious outputs. And, you know, it's sometimes, especially when you're dealing with advanced threat actors, they're not necessarily interested in you know, making your AI model being malicious, as an example, but they may be very interested in introducing bias, as an example. So could you politically sway your own AI model to discriminate against certain ethnic groups, as an example, or certain religions? You know, so data poisoning of an AI model is actually a really interesting aspect when you actually look at the threat landscape of when dealing with AI from a cybersecurity point of view. So it's really about how do you make sure, you know, that any organizational function that does rely on that output, you know, could be negatively impacted by that data poisoning, and you may not even know that it has been poisoned itself. So it's one of those things when you're considering artificial intelligence, is understanding how do you trust the model which you're actually producing as well. A very common attack, and this has sort of been on the news as well, is around what we call input manipulation attacks. Like prompt injection is the classic term which we use, and it's all around manipulating the input to break or basically jailbreak the system and to hijack the actual output as well. So you might want to be evading content filters or other safeguards restricting, you know, the AI system's functionality. And ChatGPT is, you know, one of those sort of systems as well, which people try to break all the time, or they try to make sure that they could inject certain ways so they can break the restrictions, as an example. So they can actually get different information around that as well. What I sort of alluded to previously is another sort of aspect or another threat landscape as well around this is generative AI hallucinations. So, you know, and when I sort of talk about this, it sort of relates back down to my original comments in the previous sessions, which is all about how do you ground your AI content. So grounding it to trusted, verified source data, not, you know, putting your data out into a large language model, using that to be actually trained into an external system, and then using that external system to then put information back into yours, as an example. You know, have your information separately siloed, that it's not used in what we call global training models. And one of the reasons behind that is that, you know, it is one of those sort of areas of AI where, you know, do you actually trust what it's actually generating? Do you actually trust and making sure that it's actually factually correct? And one of the ways which we tend to operate from a cybersecurity point of view when we deal with AI, but also from a user and a business point of view, which is a really important part, is to generate citations of where that content has actually come from when you're actually using artificial intelligence, because you want to be sure that it's actually from official sources, not from, you know, Google, or not from somebody who's scraped this content and changed it, as an example. And there's been multiple, you know, case studies around this. I know that we had one in Australia where I think they tabled a document as a report, but that report was downloaded from another third-party site, but they'd modified it, but they've tabled it in Parliament, as an example. So, you know, and it's one of those things where you need to make sure that the content of the systems from a cybersecurity point of view is actually factually correct. And, you know, your whole sort of business, you know, can be affected around the trust and the transparency side of things as well. So what are some of the mitigations which we can actually then put in place, as an example? So what are the considerations we want to actually then do? So I said, like, there are some really good resources that are publicly available, such as from cyber.gov.au. I know there's NIST, there's the NCSC UK's guidelines. There's even in Canada from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner as an example. And there's a lot of external publicly available information which is regularly updated, and new advice is actually published on a regular basis as well. So make sure that you subscribe to all of those sort of areas to really get a really good grounded understanding of what these sort of threat landscapes actually then look like. So what are some of the considerations we actually need to be aware of? And some of these sort of things were covered off by Konrad in some respects as well. So, you know, how does the system, affect your privacy and data protection obligations? How do you manage your privileged access to the AI system? How do you manage even backups of the AI system? Can you actually access that as well? Is your data being used to train other people's models as well? The other area I like to sort of talk about is the AI system secure by design? So, and one of the things which I think people or organizations, not necessarily legislative bodies or parliaments, is really understanding what their supply chain looks like. And with cybersecurity, even if you have the most robust system in place and you're internally managing everything correctly, etc., but you allow a third party in because they're a contractor or they're a third party supplier or whatnot, but they're actually the weak link, it doesn't really necessarily matter how robust your systems are, but if their systems can access your systems, you've got to make sure that your supply chain is secure as well. There was a published news article around where I think it was the Bureau of Meteorology here in Australia, where a foreign actor was actually attempting to hack into the Bureau of Meteorology, but their target wasn't the Bureau at all. It was actually one of the defense departments, as an example. So, so supply chain management, and AI is just a part of that supply chain. So making sure that everything that's part of that is really secure. What are your limits, constraints of the AI system? Have you defined those? Also, do you have staff or people you can actually get advice on to make sure that it is set up, maintained, and used securely? Regular audits, reviews of the AI system, the data modeling, the biasing, potentially having a look at all of that on a regular basis to make sure that, it hasn't been poisoned, it hasn't actually introduced bias, as an example. Obviously, logging and monitoring, that's a sort of a standard approach for most of the cybersecurity. But also, coming back to Konrad's sort of point, what is your action plan if something does go wrong? So it's always about, plan for something to go wrong, because then if it does, you at least know what to do or how to, or who to contact in case that something does go wrong. So always make sure you're planning for the worst. And hopefully it never happens, but again, make sure you do plan for that worst as well. And that sort of concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the very interesting and comprehensive presentation. You may turn on your camera now if you can.
Right, I'm back.
Thanks so much. Well, now allow me to yield the floor to you, Michael, to make your presentation as well in 10 minutes.
Perfect. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, good. Everybody see it? Okay, perfect. So, hello, my name is Michael Harty from the Organization of American States again. And this presentation.
Apologies to interrupt you. Can you just test to see if the slides are changing? It's a common.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Please feel free to start the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, and so in this presentation, we take more of the root of the legislative agenda and how it relates to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So as everybody knows, we're entering a new era of technology where emerging technology offers incredible potential for improving various aspects of society. But this technology also has risks, and it can be used in a malicious way. And some threats include cyber attacks, dissemination of fake news. Some crimes that are committed generally are child pornography, identity theft, digital spying, etc. And there's a need to protect human rights on the internet and protect minors on the internet as well. And artificial intelligence and cybersecurity are two very relevant aspects of these recent technological advances. And in relation to this, legislatures play a major role in the future of this technology and AI and cybersecurity. And members of these legislatures must view the future with an optimistic and innovative attitude to promote these to be used in appropriate ways and to advance society in a positive way. However, there are some issues that face legislative powers, including the emergence of cybersecurity as a regional and global concern. This has led to an evolution in the concept of hemispheric security, which needs to be reflected in legislation and in the attitude of legislators. Legislatures also must harmonize and conform laws with the inter-American and global standards. And there must be coordination between legislatures, social actors, and political organizations. Currently, also, there are a lack of adequate tools, measures, and solutions to improve cybersecurity, which hinders detection, prosecution, and punishment of cyber crimes. And by some actors, there's been politicization of cybersecurity, which leads to a lack of consensus that impedes legislation from being passed. An example of a country that has overcome many of these issues is Chile recently, which had passed a cybersecurity law in December that created a national agency of cybersecurity, a defense unit for information security within the Ministry of Defense, and multi-sectoral council on cybersecurity, which incorporates many aspects of society in solving issues that face legislatures regarding these issues. The OAS section for support of representative institutions, which is within the Secretariat for Strengthening Democracy, created a cybersecurity laboratory along with the Autonomous Technical Institute of Mexico and the Skills and Science Institute of Business School in Spain that has many objectives, that are listed here. To establish connections between different specialists, experts, and authorities in computer security, highlighting the needs, proposals, and requirements of legislative powers, generating dynamics of horizontal cooperation through which participants work collaboratively in networks and work groups, promoting presential and digital knowledge generation initiatives in the field of information security and cybersecurity, implementing replicable solutions so that the results of projects can be used in different contexts, adapted and replicated at different scales, promoting legislation and means of political control in the field of information security, cybersecurity, and the protection of personal data in the digital economy, empowering legislators to standardize methods of addressing the issue of cybersecurity by cooperating with the private sector, advising and providing technical assistance for the development of regulatory framework, laws, and political control guides, raising awareness among legislative committees regarding challenges of cybersecurity. These are all objectives of the laboratory that was created by the OAS. Additionally, in 2023, at the Anticipating the Future Congress and the Legislative Assembly of Costa Rica, this literature was presented that offers several analyses of topics that are related to cyberspace and the issues that come along with it, and 10 guiding principles for both cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, are presented for legislators to consider when considering issues related to these issues. So to delve a little deeper into cybersecurity, governments have to act on cybersecurity to protect both themselves and citizens from various malicious threats that exist. And because of this, it must be considered a priority by governments. And the 10 guiding principles that I just mentioned were developed by the OAS to assist legislators in these in taking on cybersecurity issues. So first, governments and legislatures should protect and safeguard individual rights and freedoms. They must guarantee the right to connection, inclusion, and equality and access to the internet. They must preserve sovereignty and digital democracy by establishing regulations, guaranteeing digital sovereignty, and promoting incentives to providers to guarantee full digital citizenship. They must also promote a cybersecurity culture by promoting awareness of cybersecurity and safe use of the internet and guaranteeing inclusion of all in this in the culture. They should establish freedom of expression, and privacy by default in cyberspace, promoting norms and procedures that guarantee freedom of expression and privacy while preventing harassment, threats, and attacks. They should provide also mechanisms that mitigate conflicts between these two responsibilities that are effective, reasonable, and proportionate as well. And also build a cybersecurity environment where every state must provide citizens with a participatory and resilient digital ecosystem where technology is used to preserve freedom. Further, they should ensure data privacy, ensuring the protection of personal data and privacy, and guaranteeing the well-being of citizens using the internet. Also, they must promote the supervision of the internet use of children by parents. And they should establish shared responsibility, identifying the scope of the user and provider responsibilities to allow for a technological service or application to be easily rejected or accepted, guarantee usability, and guarantee that data is only used when justified. Governments must also strengthen the development of aptitudes and skills. They must consider actions that strengthen the development of technical and legal skills and abilities necessary for citizens to know how to manage their data, know their rights, be aware of the conditions that they've accepted, know how to detect and prevent incidents and threats in cyberspace, and that such actions guarantee that a citizen might make effective claims against intermediaries and service providers in their country. They should also incorporate education for life in cyberspace, optimizing public policy and legislation to strengthen education, training, and research institutions to ensure open and accessible knowledge of science, tech, innovation, and cybersecurity, as well as involve citizens in the process of creating regulatory frameworks that promote innovation and digital transformation. It is the state's responsibility to recognize the importance of citizens being actively involved in the digital transformation process. And citizen security must be the essence of innovation to achieve a safe cyberspace that promotes a better standard of living. Moving more on to artificial intelligence, the development of AI is dramatically changing the capacities and potentials of many sectors, including healthcare, finance, manufacturing, etc. But it also has many risks that must be mitigated. And as a result, the inclusion of AI in the legislative agenda is necessary to protect all parties in society by threats and risks posed by AI. So in promoting the development, implementation, and use of AI, it's important for the parliaments of the Inter-American system to incorporate related issues into their legislative agenda on a permanent basis. So in doing this, the process must prioritize the following. Parliaments should implement generative technologies that conform to the fundamental rights mentioned in the Inter-American Charter of Human Rights and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. They should also promote innovation in a secure, transparent, and legal environment by investing in inclusion and digital universalization. And the legislation proposed must uphold democratic values in relation to data, with attention paid to personal data and privacy protections. This legislation must also promote inclusive economic development and technological growth, while paying attention to its social impact as well. In assisting in these processes and priorities, there were also 10 guiding principles developed that are used to assist governments in these issues. So governments should ensure that AI is used to enhance human development. They should ensure that the user is the main beneficiary of AI. They should also promote the use of AI to facilitate accessibility and inclusion of people with functional diversity, while avoiding biases in algorithms so that there are no patterns of discrimination or stigmatization. Governments and legislatures should also set limits on the use of AI according to its function, especially for minors and people with cognitive limitations, and ensure that control is applied to all services offered with AI. They should also have manners to properly identify the product and their services that are generated with AI, ensure governance and auditing of data and its sources, along with algorithms and products generated by AI. They should promote the registration of AI intellectual property to identify its owners and beneficiaries, and prevent products or services that are not generated from AI from being attributed to AI, which is otherwise known as AI washing. And finally, they should encourage AI education to provide people with greater knowledge, critical vision, and better social and emotional skills. So with that, I conclude the presentation. I just wanted to leave everybody with a couple of last thoughts. So in general, legislative institutions are key actors in developing legal frameworks for the use of new technologies such as AI and cybersecurity. And that any framework or legislation or policies developed must be developed through the lenses of human rights, fundamental liberties, democracy, ethics, and transparency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for the very interesting and comprehensive presentation on the work the OAS has been doing in this realm. We had the honor and the opportunity to write a chapter for the book on artificial intelligence applied to parliamentary operations on many of the elements we have been talking in this morning. So thank you so much for your participation and your presentation. Clive, would you like to share your presentation as well with your visions about cybersecurity in parliaments?
Yes.
Yes, that's perfect. We can see, and the slides are moving. So please feel free to start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Luís, and everybody else for the presentation that you've rendered. Mine is a bit different, and the reason is a bit known, I think, perhaps maybe from the onset. I think our digital transformation perhaps maybe was accelerated due to the COVID pandemic that we experienced globally. And as such, a lot of things came into play, and we had to strengthen our ICT digital transformation in terms of accelerating the adoption and the adaptation and implementation of some of the digital solutions that we needed to achieve in order to facilitate the sitting of Parliament and conducting of business in the House. And as such, it was at that point that we decided through the management of Parliament of Zambia that there was need to address cybersecurity, as digital transformation in itself increased the footprint, or rather the surface space under which our assets would be compromised, and hence availability and confidentiality and the integrity of our information assets will actually be put at risk. And we engaged management, and management was kind enough, and we actually, they supported us, and we came up with an ICT strategic plan, which would run us through to 2026. And in this strategic plan, we actually put forward to management to address cybersecurity and come up with a section of which was approved. And we actually put up an ICT section which looks at cybersecurity with a team lead. I'm heading it myself, and with 3 ICT officers. Now, with this in mind, we had to put up a plan. And this plan, of course, is not yet finalized. And with that, we asked from management to help us with enhancing the competency in terms of developing this plan, which is the Information Security Management System. And our top management in ICT actually was presented with training in ISO 27001, which looks at security. And the technical operation team actually was also taken for training in CIS to help implement and put measures to mitigate issues to do with cybersecurity in the organization. Hence, I'm saying that my presentation is a bit different because we had to start from a point at which we did not have and bring the entire team in terms of the institution into line and appreciate the fact that we needed to address cybersecurity as an organization instead of as a unit in ICT alone. And this is being done, and thankfully management has been supportive to this effect. And we are working on a few issues just to ensure that we are up to speed and catch up with the rest of the world, perhaps try to learn and do a lot of things to ensure that our digital transformation is not hampered by cybersecurity incidents within our organization. After the buy-in was sought from management, we actually did, we ran awareness programs because, of course, this actually was going to impact some of the things that the members of Parliament actually were used to do business. Of course, we had to bring in a few different policies to ensure that things like authentication and password management were done with stringent and best practice activities. And this presented a challenge because now we had to do training to the members of parliament, showing them how to use email, what not to do on the internet and stuff like that, because these are some of the issues that we had to address. So hence my reason saying that our presentation is a bit different. We are not going to look at it from the high level, but we actually had to go and address the current the issues that we were having at the grassroots in terms of our foundation. We also had to do awareness to members of staff, and these awareness are actually ongoing. We're doing educational stuff. We're sending educational materials to them through email, training, and helping them understand why some issues have become a bit more stringent to manage the cyber vulnerability that we're in. Also we had to look at training of our staff that are actually managing the systems that we're having within our parliament. So training, of course, for ICT staff in terms of cybersecurity was enhanced, and this has been undertaken. We realized that for everybody to be on board, we needed to develop some policies. And we had to take it from the base again, from the foundation, and we had to develop some password management policies, email use policy, basic hygiene for endnodes, access and identity management, remote access policy, mobile device use acceptable policy, that is stuff that people can do within the network. We also had to engage with our HR department on how we would manage our users, that is onboarding and offboarding of employees, people who are coming to use our network and stuff like that, visitors and stuff like that. And of course, we had to look at issues to do with disaster recovery. We developed all these policies, and we had to actually operationalize them to ensure that our standpoint in terms of meeting the basic cybersecurity standard in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability was at a bare minimum met. And actually, we had to develop another site where we could actually replicate our nodes to ensure that in case of any incident which would render our services inoperational, we could actually move service to another site where we can continue operating from. And this has been tested over time, and it's working perfectly well. So under the password management policies, these are some of the things that we did using our locally installed Active Directory, where we had to change the password names, complexity, the reuse, and the age of passwords, the hashing, and we had to introduce things like two-factor authentication for our internally developed applications just to enhance security. The email use also, we had to ensure that we put some tools to ensure that we minimize and mitigate issues to do with spam, spoofing, making sure that items like DMARC, sender framework policies were configured just to sanitize our environment and to bring us to a base where it was acceptable. We also introduced an element of basic hygiene. Now, basic hygiene, ideally for us, looks at items to do with how often do we service our equipment? What equipment do we have on the network? How often do we update them? How often do we check for secure configurations on them? And this has been approved, and we do it three times in a year. Every time the house actually adjourns, before we commence, we go back, we look at everything that we have, we ensure that we bring it up to speed. If it lacks patches, we deploy patches, we test, and we ensure that everything is up and running. We also do vulnerability scans on the network just to ensure that the network is up and running and it's working well. We also do access and identity management, which we do 3 times in a year, just to ensure that people that do not belong to the organization, actually we manage them. People that change roles within the organization, the institution, actually we assign the roles that are appropriate for their role. And this is what we've been doing, and this happens 3 times a year, like I said. Also, we developed the policy of the acceptable use policy. Now, this has been amongst the programs that we do in terms of awareness programs to our members of parliament, our members of staff. We actually sit down with them, we give them training on what to do, on how to use stuff. on what not to click. If they're not sure about something which looks a bit strange, they contact the right personnel in ICT and we attend to it. Some of these actually issues have helped us resolve a lot of incidents, because in the past, I think we were very, very susceptible to a lot of social engineering activities, which actually exposed us to a lot of things. The disaster recovery and backup policies, these I think was already highlighted. We just had to make sure that everybody within the institution, starting from top management, appreciated why we needed to do this for continuity's sake and for ensuring that the business is running, and we're able to fall back on something that can preserve the integrity of the business and offer service. Some of the challenges that we've had, I think, are pretty much basic, especially that we just started this process, I think, about 4 years ago, when we said we need to move with haste to address some of the challenges. Of course, we've had budget constraints. It hasn't been easy to implement some of the items we'd like to implement, but steady progress is being made, because some of these items have actually been captured within the strategic plan, and every budget that we make actually stems from the strategic plan to address some of the issues. Hence, we're making steady progress as an institution to combat cybersecurity, which is actually commendable, and the support from top management has been excellent. Of course, we've had issues to do with change management. It hasn't been easy, especially for the ordinary members of staff, to change their ways of working in terms of adhering to some of the practices that we're putting in place. And this has been, we're managing it. It was bad, it's getting better, and we hope it will get better to give us much of the advantage that we'd like to achieve, and be a much more secure, mature, and improved environment in terms of cybersecurity. With conclusion, as we are addressing the issue of security, information security management system, we've brought on board most of all the departments within the institution. There's a lot of appreciation on what is happening. Our digital transformation drive has been a bit robust in the recent past. We're trying to reach out so much to our citizenry. We've developed applications which we want to push out. Some of them we've pushed out already, where there's interaction between our citizenry and our MPs, and all this we're doing it digitally. We've developed custom applications, custom-made applications through our in-house development team. And we just want to ensure that all these things that we're doing are actually in line with our information security management system. Basically, Luís, this is the end of the presentation from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clive, for your presentation. If you can stop sharing your screen, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you for your presentations. I'd like to open the opportunity for the audience to pose questions. I took a note here at the beginning of the presentations, Mr. Andreas Schulorke from the Bundestag in Germany. You raise your hand. I'm not sure if you wish to use the floor to pose a question. If you do, please raise your hand again so we can know. I see here we also have Dr. Jaja from National Assembly of Nigeria. We are promoting Dr. Jaja. If the gentleman from the Bundestag also wishes to use the floor, please let us know by raising your hand again. In the meantime, Dr. Jaja, can you hear us?
Yes. Can I speak now?
It seems that we cannot see you, but you can do only the audio if you wish. Please feel free to pose your question either to the entire panel or to one specific colleague about this topic.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I am not sure which of the panelists mentioned that there's a cybersecurity law in Chile. I'm interested in if I can get the English version of this kind of legislation. And when another panelist mentioned that there's authentication, I'm interested in how this works for legislators. How do you authenticate your sign-in and all such procedures for the sake of cybersecurity? Thank you.
Michael, would you like to answer that? I think the reference was to you.
Right. I know you can get it in Spanish. I would have to check and see if I can find a copy in English. I'll look. I'm not 100% sure where it would be, but I'm not sure if they translate on the National Assembly of Chile but I can check. I'll try.
Can I ask, does the law include penalties for any violations?
So as far as I'm concerned, the agency that they created has jurisdiction, so I believe it does have penalties. I'm not exactly sure exactly what they are, but I would assume that it would be written in the law, so that I can try to find the English version for you, and I hope they have one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jaja. We will certainly get back to you with this material. If colleagues wish to ask more questions, please raise your hand. In the meantime, I do have a question of my own, because although I'm not an expert like our panelists, I'm very interested in this topic. And I will ask a question for all of you to answer, which is in the context of increasing sophistication of cyber threats, and at the same time lowering the cost, lowering the barrier for cyber attacks, which in the past was only state-sponsored. Now we have private organizations also in this domain. In your opinion, how is cybersecurity being considered in the context of the digital transformation strategy in the Parliament over the long term? And the second question is, are there specific forecasts or models being used to predict the level of investments needed in the coming decade to counter these threats? Konrad, would you like to start answering that in 3 minutes?
Okay, thank you, Luís. I'll do my best to contain the answer within 3 minutes. So to answer your question, I'm going to double down on this whole holistic cyber resilience to make sure that you look at things holistically within the organization, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a business perspective. Because in today's world, as you mentioned, the sophistication of attacks is quite impressive, to be honest. And I'll maybe give you a concrete example that really surprised me and fascinated me at the same time. So ChatGPT is all a buzz these days, and Jonathan mentioned the effects of hallucinations of, let's say, generative AI such as ChatGPT. It's no surprise that software engineers like myself, they leverage ChatGPT to generate code, to basically provide solutions for the systems that they're building. Now, in the context of hallucination, what can happen is that ChatGPT sometimes can hallucinate a usage of a third-party library that may not exist. So it seems convincing, but the library doesn't exist. And attackers actually noticed this issue for some of the problems, and they created this fake library, posted it on the internet, and ultimately, you've got developers who look for this library because ChatGPT suggested the usage of it, and the only result they find is a compromised version of it. So this goes to what Jonathan was referring to as a supply chain attack. So now you're introducing an external component into your solution that ultimately compromises your system without even you knowing it, unless you protect it. So really, what I'm going with this is ensuring holistic cybersecurity resilience. And I'll touch on Jonathan's point, secure by design, making sure that you protect against supply chain attacks, making sure you're able to respond to certain things and certain events like this. And it's hard to predict really what lengths of sophistication or creativity attackers will go through. And I think this is a good example that surprises all of us. So really investing and doing threat modeling around your system to ensure that you have proper investments made into your holistic system is necessary. So from a predictive perspective, it's really understanding what are your weaknesses and where you need to address them, and really working with the business to start addressing that risk and start prioritizing those risks. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much, Konrad. Jonathan, in addition to my question, I would very much like to hear your comments to what Konrad just said as well. I know that's a topic that you are an expert to, so please feel free to use the floor.
No, it's all right. I'll try to be concise for about 3 minutes as well. You know, it's an interesting topic that, you know, you've had holistic overview, and, you know, cyber is, you know, obviously one of those components, and supply chain. I'm very sort of much advocating around supply chain management and those sort of other areas as well. Because what we've sort of found traditionally is that organizations, and it's not necessarily with parliaments, and just organizations have been really bad about managing their supply chains. And one of the reasons why I sort of advocate around open source is that, you know, if you go to GitHub, it's an open source product, as an example, you can at least vet, you know, there's a secure by design sort of approach to it, where you can actually look at things and make sure it's relevant, it's going to affect, you know, and it's sort of building, you know, and again, like we've gone through an ISO 27001 2013 or 2022 standard now, and so we're certified, you know, from a global perspective around that. And it's really about, I think, you know, how do you make sure that your staff, you know, through education awareness, are actually, you know, secure by design. And it's sort of like, I've used the analogy previously, you know, years and years and years ago, it all used to be about occ health and, you know, safety. You know, again, it is obviously a lot in certain industries, but, you know, everyone was sort of, you know, safety is everyone's responsibility. And nowadays, cybersecurity or cyber safety is now everyone's security, you know, is really everyone's responsibility. And it's sort of really about how do you do that, sort of, you know, as Konrad was saying, like the paradigm shift between, well, it's actually part of my day job, you know, it's part of my day-to-day thinking and my day-to-day operations, that, you know, the landscape of artificial intelligence is changing like hourly. It's changing every day. There are new models coming out, you know, it seems like, you know, on a weekly or a monthly basis. So therefore, every single time something new comes out, everyone's trying to jump on it. There's a new threat actor, there's a new, and one of my sort of biggest advices to everyone here is to make sure, you know, that, you know, you just don't have one policy, keep it on the shelf, you know, review it in a year's time. You know, you need to be adaptive, you need to be proactive in your cyber defense and your cyber planning and your responsibilities, and also what your responses are, because there are new threat landscapes which we haven't even thought about yet, because people don't actually know what the limits are of artificial intelligence at the moment. Like, so if you look at it and go, we're at that sort of a cusp of that learning curve, and we sort of call it that bell curve, where because of ChatGPT, you know, before ChatGPT, we were sort of twiddling along down the bottom, but now we got the ChatGPT explosion, but we're still on the upwards trend. So by making sure that we're being proactive, we are analyzing those threats at a meaningful level, we can then manage that risk as a business, to make sure that we're doing things in a proactive way, because at the moment, things are changing very rapidly, very dynamically. So you need to adapt your policy to suit that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your considerations. Clive, would you like to share your thoughts on this matter as well?
Yes, I think Konrad and Jonathan have put it right. And cybersecurity is not a one-off event. You do not actually purchase some technology that will help you today. It might help you for one incident today, but tomorrow it's a different case. I look at it as it's a behavioral aspect. There are people, there's technology, and it's how you bring all these efforts together. And what is it that you learn every day? How do you adapt? How do you put into practice some activities that can be helping you on a daily basis? For instance, in our case, I think we do have systems that we monitor on a daily basis. Somebody comes in, we monitor the logs, what is happening on our network. And now you start getting that information and you start correlating to how the network was yesterday. What has changed today? What behavioral aspects can you pick from the network that can give you insights on what is happening on your network? And based on that, you'll be not really ahead of them, but at least you have an idea of what is changing on a daily basis. And with that, then you start developing you adjust your policies, you adjust your activities, you adjust your awareness programs to the people. And with the people in mind that are logging on your network, with the equipment that you have, with your policies, which is growing and changing on a daily basis, you'll be able to mitigate some of these effects of cybersecurity. I think that would be my comment on that.
Thank you so much, Clive, for your considerations. Michael, would you like to share your thoughts on this topic as well?
Sure. I think that I am largely in agreement with the rest of them. I guess just looking from our perspective as like working with the parliaments themselves, I think that something that we emphasize is the inclusion of these policies as a permanent basis to continue to keep up with these ongoing threats that you never really, I guess, can be in front of them, but like you learn from things that have happened recently and keep incorporating these new ideas and new thoughts into legislation and to try to mitigate as many future threats as possible. And that's something that why legislatures and lawmakers must like make sure that they take these threats seriously to be able to proactively kind of fight against them as they come about. So I think that that's just about what I would like to add, but yes, I agree with everybody.
Thank you so much, Michael. I see we have a little bit of time, so I will take advantage of your expertise and ask you another question, which is sometimes it's very hard to engage with colleagues that are not from IT. I mean, not necessarily members of parliament, but colleagues that work in legislative procedures, drafting, communications, and to explain the importance of cybersecurity, to explain that's not an inconvenience, but that's part of the process. I'd like to ask everyone in the panel how you're handling these in your parliament or in the parliaments that you have been working with on engaging, evangelizing colleagues that are not from the IT domain about this importance. Have been doing courses? Have you issued guidelines? How are you approaching to share this knowledge and these concerns about cybersecurity? Konrad, would you like to share your thoughts on that in 3 minutes as well?
Okay. So at the House of Commons, we certainly have an official cybersecurity awareness program that brings some of these elements to light and educates, whether it's our members of Parliament or our business users or any other employees. So certainly there's an element of that. But the other element, I think, is really trying to find a common language to put things into perspective for the business and for them to understand what are the implications of cybersecurity? How can it actually affect concretely their business? So really finding those examples that are applicable to the business and in their language, I think it's key. And sometimes it's hard to do it, but once you put things into perspective, people understand, and then they realize the significance of the threats out there. And especially they start thinking about this in their context and their business processes that can be crippling to the organization. So I would say focusing on this communication is one key aspect in addition to the cyber awareness program.
Thank you so much, Konrad. Jonathan, would you like to share your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I think education is probably the biggest tool, and change management is really important when we actually look at that. And I think it's sort of, how do you pitch cybersecurity not as a technical function of IT, but as a business function, So cybersecurity is there to support the business. It's not there as a technical black box with some people sitting in a dark room hammering on a keyboard. It's getting away from that mentality around it's a very dark art and bringing back down to the basics around how do you make it to a real life scenarios which they can relate to. So like it's only really, and this is what we usually find with anything from a security point of view, people don't sometimes worry about it until it affects them, and it's only until it affects them that they'll start to take an interest in it, as an example. So, it'll be only one time where you use as a citizen, if that makes sense. Like, you might use a very weak password to log into your bank account details, and you might get hacked, and it's only going to take once, but after that you'll learn it the hard way, if that makes sense, but you will learn in some respects around that. But it's how do you develop a program of that cybersecurity is actually important as well. And I was working with one of the parliaments over the last, if I look at it, we've been probably working with this one particular parliament for 15 plus years. And it's only really in the last sort of really 3 to 5 years that we've seen a massive uptake in cybersecurity training awareness. It's that sort of whole process where they've started to realize, actually, we need to, it isn't just about legislating bills, or it's not just about servicing citizens, etc. We need to make sure that we've got a level of trust and transparency, security, around information. What Konrad sort of first slide, where you've got the people, the information, what are you trying to protect, if that makes sense? Like, that there are a lot of sophisticated actors out there. And I'll finish off with one little fact, that I was on a course where it was basically on a what they call an IRAP assessment course, where you can audit federal government agencies and whatnot. And one of the facts of it was that they were saying that when you actually put a computer or a virtual machine up on the cloud, like it might be in Amazon, it might be in Azure, or it might be in a whole range of different other providers, on average it takes 28 seconds for the first attack to start occurring. 28 seconds from you turning that machine on in a cloud environment for an attack to start occurring, if you've not configured it right. So, and the threat landscape is very different now. When you look at that sort of traditional, like everything's on a little container on premise, now everything's around where you've got hybrid, like you've got a lot more threats to actually work out. And again, supply chain management is really important. Don't discount that, and do audits around yourself as well. Like, audit yourself. Again, try to get an external independent auditor, but do audits to make sure that you are compliant, you're understanding the current threats. Is really, I think, some of those sort of valuable advice that you don't want to learn those things the hard way.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the very valuable recommendations and insights. Clive, any thoughts on this as well?
Yes, I think for us it's still a challenge, I must confess, and I think we've taken some as the department responsible for cybersecurity within the institution, we've taken some steps. But again, there's still a backlash which is coming, especially from the members of parliament. I think you educate, they do not see the essence of it. We've had a few incidents here and there. and people have complained. You go back, you educate. There's been some improvement, not that much improvement that would give us a bit of confidence to say we've done a lot of education and people are comfortable with what is happening within the cyberspace. People are still do not see the need for two-factor authentication. Why should I authenticate in this manner? Why should my password change on my mobile device? Why should I be forced to change my password? I cannot reuse the old password and stuff like that. But these are some of the things that we've tried to implement using the support of top management. We've explained to them, they do agree, and they've seen some issues where we've got some MPs whose social media accounts have been compromised. And as such, they are sending fictitious messages to a lot of people, lobbying for things that they shouldn't be, account details being exposed like that. So we take advantage of such kind of instances, and we do educate. And we've seen some improvement and some appreciation from the MPs. And now if they have a challenge, we see them pop in within the ICT department. Please give us a one-on-one kind of education. You explain to them, you take them through, and that appreciation is growing day by day. I must emphasize that prior to COVID, most of our MPs, I think, did not see, let me just say maybe parliaments traditionally did not see much of the need, especially maybe in Africa, the need for ICTs and the digital transformation journey in itself. And that in itself, I think, presented a challenge, because I think in terms of the literacy levels we had were not that enhanced within our members of parliament and such. But with the oncoming of COVID, where people could not sit and attend meetings within the confines of a parliamentary building, and we had to now extend the service of parliamentary meetings to places where they could do it from home and stuff. That's when we started seeing an upsurge in trying now to understand what is this digital transformation, how can we leverage it to do business for ourselves and to enhance how we do our operations as MPs. Well, also as members of staff, because now we had to push people to go back to their homes and work from home and stuff like that. So we always go back to that and try to remind them to say, look, the normal way of doing business, the way it was prior to COVID, may not go back to that. This might be the way we will go. How do we go to the future like this? We need to embrace cybersecurity. And the awareness programs are being done once, twice, 3 times, maybe within a sitting. Normally we sit within 2 months, but we take advantage when they come, and we do push those awareness programs to ensure that people are on board and they appreciate why we're doing some of these things. That would be my contribution, Luís.
Thank you so much, Clive, for your contribution. Michael, would you like to share your thoughts on this topic as well?
Sure. So briefly, I guess similarly to Clive, we also increased our cybersecurity capacity and working with cybersecurity during the pandemic, and it's been going since then much more than it was before. But also, I guess that our main strategy is promoting initiatives both in person and online to engage with different people, be they politicians or legislators or people working in legislators as aides or whatever, to engage with these projects that emphasize the importance of cybersecurity or emphasize specific aspects of cybersecurity, et cetera. So I think that that's the main method that we've been taking.
Thank you so much, Michael. Very briefly, I'd like to yield the floor for each one of you for 30 seconds, 1 minute, for any final words that you might have. Konrad, would you like to start? Any final thoughts?
Okay, so my final thought is really, as we work on creating the value for the organization to meet the ever-evolving technology demand, it's in that process of creating that value, we really have to think how we protect it at the same time. So one of the elements that you can implement is zero trust mitigation. And with that comes the business enablement to make sure you align security to the organization's missions and the priorities, risks and processes. You have to assume compromise because in today's ever-evolving threats, you have to be ready, hope for the best, but plan for the worst, as Jonathan said. Assume that compromise. So continuously reduce the blast radius and attack surface through, the prevention and detection and response and the recovery, that whole aspect of cyber resiliency. And shift the asset-centric security strategy to make sure that you protect the assets, focusing on the people, information, and your business critical processes. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Konrad, for your final thoughts. Jonathan, would you have any final thoughts on this matter?
Yeah. So manage cybersecurity as a business risk, I think, is probably fundamental, which I'd like to sort of say. So it's a business risk. So technical side is the technical side, but it comes down to a business risk. My other sort of thoughts is around managing supply chain. So, for example, every single contract that we sign, we make sure that we're always on the hook for making sure that we're ISO 27001, 2013 or 2022 certified company. And that means that we follow process. We follow that. We get independently audited. And I'd recommend, engaging with companies, who do have those sort of certifications as well, to make sure that you feel confident that, you're dealing with companies, if you're dealing with a company that, takes security seriously as well. Because what we find is, we were sort of talking with Parliament just before Christmas, and they were sort of talking to another company. And they said, "Oh yeah, we're ISO certified." And then they sort of the Parliament turned around and said, "Okay, well, where's your certificate and XYZ?" No, because we host our application on Microsoft Azure, we're ISO certified. So, and it's like, well, no, you haven't even gone through the process. You don't understand the process. Just because you host something on a certified platform doesn't necessarily mean that your processes will actually stop, certain threat things occurring. So my recommendation is look at those sort of standards, look at the international standards, align with those processes. It will help you a long way in terms of understanding, some of those aspects which you would like to implement internally within your organization.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your final considerations. Clive, any final thoughts on today's topic?
Yes, thank you, Luís. I think there's been a paradigm shift from the past. I think in the past, ICT was looked upon as just a department, but I think it's not really a department, but it's an enabler. It helps the business achieve its goals. And in this case where I think IT is it's an enabler, as well as it drives the business to achieve its goals. And previously, things that would make IT break were physical things. Hardware would stop working, hard disks would crash and stuff like that. But I think what is happening now, what is the major risk to stopping a service is cybersecurity. And I think we need to increase our risk surveillance, and we need to grade these risks accordingly, and we need to identify measures that we have to put in place to mitigate these risks. And in that light, we need to work closely with the risk teams within our institutions and highlight to them the consequences of some of these risks if they're not mitigated. Because if, as ICT people, sell the idea to top management, it becomes difficult. But if there's risk involved in identification and the mitigation process, then it becomes much, much easier for management to understand why we would need to mitigate some of these risks, especially when budgets might be involved in it. Hence, cybersecurity, I think, is something that we need to look at holistically as an organization. It has to be appreciated, and the consequences of not mitigating something need to be understood by the entire business, not just by ICT. That would be my take from them.
Thank you so much, Clive, for your final thoughts. And to close today's panel, Michael, do you have any final thoughts, very briefly, to conclude this panel?
Sure. So I just want to emphasize again the importance of legislative institutions in developing legal frameworks that help to promote these technologies to be used in positive ways and to be able to have consequences for people that use it in negative ways, to be able to detect and to take appropriate action following maybe attacks or threats or cyber crimes. And that to emphasize the importance of taking into account the ethics, democracy, democratic values, human rights, etc., in the legislative process in legislation that's developed in reference to these topics.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for your final considerations. Thank you, Konrad Kiki from the House of Commons of Canada, Ruckert from NovaWorks in Australia, Clive Mutentwa from the National Assembly of Zambia,